The leader of this high-class family has a problematic daughter. She's arrogant, but has zero talent for magic. In this world, only those with talent and power are respected. The poor and the talentless are despised. Only those with some kind of strength have the right to survive. Even among nobles, the weak get discarded by their own families. Men need to be powerful, and women do too. You can be arrogant, you can have twisted desires, but if you're strong, none of that matters. So when the head of House Duplain realized his beautiful daughter was nothing but a pretty face and nothing else, he hired a talented, good-looking mage to teach Diela Duplain how to use magic. But the girl threw dirty water on the teacher and declared that a filthy commoner rat wasn't even worthy of looking at her. Our protagonist Derek looked at her anyway, so the girl kicked him and told him he was only allowed to look at the soles of her feet. For most people, maybe that would be a dream come true. Our MC didn't like it one bit and slapped the noble girl right across the face. "That's for staying quiet," he said coldly. The girl is rich and important, and no one had ever done that to her before. She just found out the first time hurts like hell. Diela slapped him right back and threatened that his life was over. What she got in return was an even harder slap. Derek said in an ice-cold voice, "Treat people with respect, and you'll get respect back. Noble arrogance knows no limits." So the girl screamed for her head butler, claiming a servant had assaulted her. Everyone rushed to the young lady's room, warning the boy that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. But the MC didn't back down. He pulled out his authorization. The family head had given him permission to use any method necessary to teach her. The only condition, there had to be a body left over for the funeral. The girl's older brother heard about this and confronted the boy later, furious. He had no right to touch a noblewoman. Derek showed no regret, which only made the brother angrier. The MC simply said, "Your father allowed it," and as everyone knows, the head of the family's orders are absolute. So when the black-haired brother went to their father demanding Diela be expelled from the family, the father told him, just once, that he had plans for her. And when the son tried to push back, the father gently reminded him that his orders were final. Remembering that, the black-haired brother backed off. The blonde brother later took Derek to Diela's childhood room and showed him that when she was young, she'd been sweet and cheerful. He didn't know exactly what had changed her, but somewhere along the way, growing up turned her into this. Derek spotted magic books among her old things and realized what was going on. There was also a painting the girl had made. It said a lot too. Derek made a promise. Diela would be fixed. That very same night, the girl was sleeping when she was suddenly jolted awake. Derek simply said she must be thirsty. This was the second time she'd been handled like that. Then the boy dragged her out of her room and took her far from the castle, saying this might be the last time too. When he threw her down, the girl had no idea what was happening. Even her father's orders had limits. Derek smiled for the first time and said, "I'm not here to teach you magic. I just enjoy beating arrogant nobles whenever I get the chance." Fear ran through her flat-chested little body. None of this made any sense. Derek made it clearer. Arrogant nobles with no talent like her get thrown out and shipped off to convents, so the MC figured he'd get to hear their screams before that happens. The girl still held on to hope that this was some kind of setup, but when she saw her own reflection in Derek's sword, pure survival instinct kicked in and she ran. If she could reach the forest, she could hide in the dark. Then a fireball lit up the distance. She recognized it instantly as level 2 magic. This kid was a high-tier mage, and judging by the look on his face, his intent really was to kill her. The MC's attack landed close beside her. "Missed the first shot," he said. "Lucky you." The girl kept running, and the attacks kept closing in. But Derek stayed calm, commenting on things like how her agility didn't seem to match a failed noble who'd spent her whole life locked in her room. This forest, it was the same one from her paintings. While he was thinking that, the girl tried to fight back with a rock, but Derek sliced it apart like paper. Diela had tried it anyway because she knew there was no way to outrun him, and Derek actually praised her fighting spirit. Though it must be pretty confusing, getting praised by the person about to kill you. Derek tried to get her last words out of her. He asked why she was so obsessed with bloodline. That's when the girl broke. She screamed that it was all she had left. A noble with no magic is trash. This whole magic-obsessed world is bullshit. She tried harder than anyone, and still nothing. No magic. Ever. If those were her last words, the MC said his goodbyes and wished her luck in her next life. He struck with his sword. Boom! But the blade hit ice. Ice? How? That was definitely the girl's magic. After 15 years, the damn spoiled brat finally got magic. Derek praised her, apologized for his rudeness, and told her she needed to understand. This had been the only strategy that would actually work. The girl cried with everything she had. She'd finally done it. Before we find out what happens to our MC Derek, we need to understand how this commoner got here in the first place. About 8 years ago, there was this old man, the only one in this poor village who knew how to use magic, and nobody liked him for it. Magic is a noble's business. That's what everyone believed, but Derek never thought that way. The protagonist wasn't especially interested in learning magic, but the old man insisted he needed a disciple and took him in. The old man wanted followers, but couldn't get any because of his own arrogance, and the boy didn't care about any of that. So through winter and through summer alike, he trained and followed every piece of advice he was given. The boy showed signs of raw talent early on. Before long, the old man realized he was standing in front of someone with an incredibly powerful mana flow. Within just a few tries, the boy quickly learned how to conjure weapons out of his own mana. He managed to fire magic arrows that struck deep into a tree far in the distance. This beggar kid had actually already done it. The old man wasn't about to let talent like that go to waste. Derek spent over a year training under the old man. Sometime later, the protagonist became a one-star mage, having learned everything his mentor could teach him. Now, the old man tells him there's a wall to the north of Ebelstein, a place where noble boys reach 3 stars before they even come of age. But he says his student still isn't ready to compete with nobles. There's still so much he needs to learn. He also says magic comes down to bloodline. No matter how hard someone fights against that truth, in the end, nobles always come out on top. For his part, the protagonist thinks that's just an excuse the old man uses to avoid admitting his own failure. But that turned out to be the last piece of advice he'd ever hear from his mentor, because when the rain started falling that night, the old man never woke up. To Derek, it was obvious. The old man was dead. He buried the man and noticed the body was wounded and malnourished. He also heard rumors that the old man had been beaten while trying to steal a 2-star magic book from a warehouse. I'm so damn sad right now. The old man died trying to steal a book for his student. The protagonist went cold inside, realizing just how unjust this world really was. Derek isn't even from this world, and it was in that traumatic moment that his legendary status window awakened. 4 years passed since then. In the city, Katya Flameheart is the most talked about name around, a former lady of a noble house that had fallen from grace. Despite losing her Viscountess title, this beauty is a 3-star mage. While seeking work as a mercenary, she came across Derek, a commoner she immediately recognized had abnormal talent. So she took him under her wing and taught him that the rich and powerful would grow uneasy over his talent, meaning he needed to stay cautious even about his own gift. After some time under her guidance, Derek became capable of casting a level 2 spell, one that unleashed a powerful sound that scrambled the senses. All the mercenaries around them completely lost it, trying to figure out what the hell that attack sound even was. Katya didn't bother explaining. She just grabbed Derek and pulled him far away from there. Then the woman explained, dead serious. Nobles place enormous value on their privileges. A commoner with more talent than them is something they simply won't tolerate. They'll treat him as an enemy. The spell Derek learned was level 2. Now he was officially a 2-star mage. After all that, Katya traveled with Derek and taught the boy everything she possibly could, until one day the county of Elvester appointed Katya as a private tutor to a noble. That's not something you can turn down. So the two of them parted ways. A few months passed. Derek learned 2 more level 2 spells on his own. Now, just 16 years old, staying in this city wasn't enough for him to keep growing. Later, at the Belden Tavern, a tavern keeper named Jaden had a job for Derek. A request from House Duplain, the Grand Duchy. At the time, Derek only knew this family was famous in the region. He had no idea why they'd want to give a job to someone like him. But the man didn't care about the reasons. He'd seen the gold coins, and there were a lot of them. No matter what, this kid needed to take the job. With arguments that strong, Derek accepted. The man explained the task was simple: clear out goblins from a region of the territory. Derek couldn't help but think a job this simple made things feel off. This had to be a trap. He wasn't going to take it. Before leaving, the man begged, swearing there was no one else he could trust with this job. On top of that, they'd already paid 1 gold coin up front. So Derek was brought before the clients, a friendly-looking lord and lady, and a mysterious girl. The mustached lord didn't like the idea one bit. Nobody told him a boy this young would be the one chosen. He wasn't going to accept this. But the hooded girl stepped in and insisted on hiring the boy. Later, out in the territory, the goblins were completely and utterly humiliated. Those red eyes of the boys were cruel and cold. Even when they tried to attack from behind, the boy was faster. He'd dodge, then return the exact same favor. You like attacking from behind? Then you won't mind getting the same treatment. Before long, the last of them was wiped out. Derek let them know the job was done. The 3 of them couldn't hide their shock. The boy really was that powerful. It seemed the hooded girl had ulterior motives when it came to Derek. Derek assured them there wouldn't be any more goblins showing up around there, so the old man needed to pay the rest of what was owed. And there it was. 2 beautiful gold coins. That's a fortune. Jaden and the boy could practically take a vacation with that. But then the old man interrupted the poor folks' celebration, saying he had one more job to offer, and of course that got their attention immediately. When the old man said he'd pay 15 gold coins right then and there, Derek didn't even blink. He simply said he'd do any job for that. So they headed to House Duplain's castle. Just as you'd expect from the rich and powerful, the place was massive and spotless. The old man finally introduced himself properly. The mustached lord was actually named Delon, the grand steward who served Duke Duplain directly. The woman from before was Katarina. That pretty, friendly face belonged to the head maid of the castle. Derek had known from the start that these people were lying about their identities. They'd claimed to be low-ranking staff, but their behavior never quite added up. So once everyone's lies were out in the open, the girl from before finally revealed herself. She was the eldest daughter of House Duplain, Aisline Eleanor Duplain, and she wanted to hire Derek as a magic tutor. She led the boy into the castle. Along the way, Derek got a first-hand look at just how real the noble's reputation was. One of the maids was crying alone in a corner. Aisline introduced her father to Derek, the new teacher who'd try to teach Diela. She'd brought him in from the countryside. The father seemed like a very busy man, but when Aisline mentioned she'd be leaving with Derek, the man asked the boy to stay behind. He wanted to speak with Derek alone. Duke Duplain asked what level Derek could manipulate magic at. The MC answered, 1 star. The man took off his glasses and warned him, "You have no reason to lie in this room." In that moment, Derek understood. Duke Duplain operates on a level where humility gets you nowhere. Derek is actually 2 stars, and from his clothes, the Duke figured out Derek was a mercenary, not someone fit to teach his daughter. But if Aceline had chosen him, the Duke had no reason to doubt her judgment. It was at that meeting that Derek took the liberty of asking Duke Duplain for permission to be aggressive, even violent, if that's what it took to teach the girl. That same day, he was introduced to the girl. Even the maids had no peace, constantly dodging flying plates of food. So Derek approached the spoiled girl, got humiliated by her, took a beating, fought back, and hit her right back. Then he hit her again and stood his ground against the staff, showing them her father's permission to use force. That night, he went to her room and made her believe she was about to be thrown out of the family and punished because of him. Pushed right to her limit. That's when her magic finally awakened. She cried hard. Derek tended to her wounds and told her the truth. Her type of magic wasn't what she thought it was. She was a wild type. The way she sensed mana was different from the traditional path. The girl had no idea any of this was true. Derek explained he'd figured it out from the forest drawing Diela had made. The way mana flows through nature was exactly what had guided her drawing. Mages with a wild school temperament are deeply connected to nature's mana. Starting tomorrow, Derek would teach her how to control mana and magic. For the first time in a long while, something happened that hadn't happened before. The girl thanked another person. Then they walked back to the castle together, talking the whole way. The next morning, Diela woke up and the first thing she did was test it. It wasn't a dream. She really could channel mana now. She could actually see it. At her bedroom door, a maid happened to be passing by. When Diela threw the door open, the startled maid ended up soaked. This was it. This was the end. The girl was known for taking revenge even on people who'd done nothing wrong, so the maid bowed and begged, just asking for a decent funeral. But get this, the girl just told her to be more careful, then walked off. The maid had never made it this far before. The other maids nearby were just as stunned. This was seriously strange. In another room, Derek was sleeping like a prince when suddenly a giant of a man started pounding on his door. Diela wanted to learn how to control her mana right now. This was shocking to Delon. Had a miracle really happened overnight? Derek slammed the door in their faces and said he'd only work in the afternoon. Picture the spoiled girl's face getting told no. She went right back to pounding on the door, but Derek was used to noise like that and just went right back to sleep, deep within the mansion of the Duplain estate. Raig paces through the sprawling halls. Along the way, he overhears the maids whispering that Lady Diela hasn't broken a single plate or even laid a hand on them today. They say she actually managed to manifest mana all on her own. Hearing this, Raig stops dead in his tracks. He spins around, demanding to know what they just said. Meanwhile, Duke Duplain silently signs documents in his study. He questions the rumor of her manifesting mana, and Valerian explains he already confirmed the details with both the butler and the maids. The Duke sighs, calling it a massive relief. Raig cuts in, warning them not to make rash decisions based on a single fluke. Valerian snaps back, telling him he should be praising his own sister for such an achievement instead. Duke Duplain merely watches, coldly analyzing the clash between them. Raig demands to know if their father has forgotten all her past outrages, arguing that one minor success is no excuse to let her remain in the house. The Duke simply continues working in silence, offering no reply. Soon, the hour of the lesson arrives. Diela sits with her back turned completely to her tutor. Derek dryly asks if she is throwing a tantrum. She snaps back that she isn't throwing a tantrum. She is just incredibly angry. He scratches his head, warning her that throwing a fit won't change a thing. If she keeps acting up, he won't have a choice, because everything must happen in its proper order. Diela whips around in irritation, reiterating just how furious she is. In response, Derek glares at her with a bone-chilling stare to put her in her place. Instantly terrified, her attitude completely shifts as she meekly admits she was indeed pouting. Pulling up a chair, Derek sits down to begin the lesson. He explains that manifesting magic doesn't mean she can run around using it recklessly, warning her that things could easily spiral out of control. He notes that rest is just as vital as study, and tells her it is time to hit the books again, though Diela groans, complaining that she knew he would say that. Derek asks if she would prefer to learn the hard way instead. Memories of yesterday's brutal ordeal instantly flash through her mind. She quickly behaves, sitting upright and begging him to just forget she said anything. Derek explains that today's lesson is on mana control, and once she masters it, she can finally learn one-star magic. He points out that the wild, unstructured style of the jungle school isn't ideal for rigorous study, as it lacks the strict discipline of conventional institutions. Yet, in truth, he believes that lawless style actually suits her perfectly. Her wild spirit thrives in that environment, and carrying the Duplain bloodline, she possesses undeniable natural talent. Hearing his words, she instantly beams with excitement. Her cheeks turning bright red, she eagerly asks if he truly believes she has talent. Derek confirms she has plenty of talent after all. Manifesting an ice barrier is no small feat, but he makes it clear that having talent and being a true genius are two completely different things. From afar, Raig overhears the entire conversation. He grows so furious that he actually grinds his teeth. The next day, Diela appears at the door, claiming she can now direct her magic properly. She tries to use her ice magic again, but something still feels off. and the exact same thing keeps happening over the following days. Diela refuses to leave him alone, trailing after him even during his moments of rest. She tells him he should stay near the annex, since her father didn't lend him those spell books just for him to laze around. Derek agrees, stating that is exactly why he accepted the books in the first place. Diela then shares that she managed to make her mana flow just as he explained. Meanwhile, in one of the rooms, Valerian gazes out the window until someone opens the door. Derek asks if he was the one who summoned him, and Valerian tells him to take a seat because they need to talk. He wants to know how things are progressing with the girl. Derek explains that she is making decent progress, but it will still take some time before she can cast one-star magic. Valerian understands the situation and mentions that his mother has traveled to a social event, but should return next week. He warns that she is not the type to go easy, because while the locals are good people, the nobility naturally despises commoners who rise above their station. Derek says he is already aware of that, and asks if that was the only reason he was called there. Valerian remains silent for a few seconds. He begins to explain that he is the next head of the Duplain household, a position that requires him to embrace and integrate every family member, being sincere with each of them. But he confesses that this is incredibly difficult because people are complicated and intense, and while it would be great if everyone thought alike, reality simply doesn't work that way. Derek loses his patience and asks where he is going with this conversation. Valerian clenches his fist tightly. He turns around in tears, complaining that Diela simply doesn't want to play with him anymore. This sudden reaction completely shatters the serious mood in the room. Valerian begins to ramble, saying he still vividly remembers how she used to smile whenever she greeted him. He begs for help, asking if there is really no other way to win over his sister's heart. He complains that Derek is the only one she listens to, while outside Diela can be heard shouting and searching for him. Valerian asks him to wait and shows him a doll, explaining that he learned how to sew from the maids. He asks if the doll doesn't look exactly like Diela, hoping it will make her feel her older brother's love. Derek stares at it and asks if he is trying to cast a curse on the girl. The heir of the house bursts into tears again, lamenting that he really is useless at these things. Later on, the lady of the house remarks that she has heard a great deal about him. She says it seems they have finally found a truly competent teacher. She introduces herself as Morella Duplain and offers to send him a gift straight from her territory, if it is no trouble. But he immediately shuts her down, stating he has no ties to any noble family. Morella is visibly taken aback by his blunt response. In response, he explains that he is nothing more than a commoner. This revelation leaves the woman completely speechless. A week later, Aiseline mentions how incredibly glad she is to have brought him to the Grand Duke's residence. She expresses her wish to spend more time with her younger sister, but notes she must head back to Ebelstein to handle several pressing matters. Derek listens quietly, understanding the situation perfectly. Right then, Jaden claps a hand on his shoulder, emphasizing that she is placing her little sister's safety entirely in his hands. He urges her to wrap things up and return quickly, warning that hell will break loose if Pauline finds out. Left behind, the protagonist stands alone, watching the carriage fade into the distance. Suddenly, Aiseline realizes she forgot one crucial detail. She failed to mention that their mother is returning next week. Jaden frowns, asking if that is really something to worry about. The problem is, her mother is highly volatile. To put it bluntly, the woman is practically the goddess of wrath herself. In an instant, the scene shifts to her slamming her hand on the Duke's desk, demanding to know what kind of joke it is to hire a commoner as Diela's tutor. The Duke groans at the noise, telling her to keep her voice down, but she snaps back that the volume is not the issue, but rather the future of Diela, her beloved youngest daughter. The Duke counters, reminding her she already knows he despises placing commoners in high positions as much as she does. He points out that no noble tutor managed to teach the girl a single thing, but Morella fires back, asking how he dared to hire a former mercenary of all people. The Duke argues that good magic tutors are hard to find, adding that Derek came highly recommended by Aiseline herself. Morella demands that the family must maintain a bare minimum of standards. She suggests using her younger brother, Flam, who was busy before but now has free time. The Duke questions if she really wants to pull someone away from managing the territory just for private tutoring, warning that Ebelstein will fall into chaos if they act so recklessly. Morella loses her temper and screams, asking if he forgot that high society is a ruthless war zone. She declares that a tutor's reputation is everything, and Diela cannot become a laughingstock when she makes her debut. At that exact moment, the study door swings open. Valerian steps in and tells his mother to calm down, reminding her she did not come here to pick a fight with his father. Morella snaps at him to stay out of it, warning that this matter is far too grave to ignore. Then Reg enters the room, agreeing with his mother completely. Hearing her son's support, her face twists into a malicious smirk. Reg argues that letting a commoner teach a noble is absurd, but concedes there would be no issue if the man actually proved his capability. He proposes to test this Derek personally, declaring he will settle the matter in a magic duel. However, the Duke cuts him off immediately, warning him that the man is a brutally skilled warrior. The Duke's response only fuels Reg's growing fury, so he shifts tactics, proposing they test Diela herself instead. Valerian is instantly baffled, unable to comprehend where this sudden idea came from. Reg reasons that if this Derek is truly such an exceptional tutor, Diela must have made incredible progress progress, and announces he will duel her himself to prove it. Duke Duplain is left entirely speechless, completely at a loss for words. Outside the room, Valerian rushes to catch up with his brother. He demands to know what madness possessed him to demand a magic duel out of nowhere. Reg snaps back, asking if Valerian honestly believes Diela has changed, or if he has already forgotten all the chaos she caused in the past. Valerian counters that no matter what she did, Diela is still their sister. They share the same blood, and the family must protect her. Reg sighs in sheer frustration, scoffing at the mention of blood ties. Then he snaps, shouting that this very blood is destroying their family, and if she enters high society like this, it will ruin them all. In that instant, Valerian realizes the sheer gravity of the situation and just how deeply his brother is hurting. Turning to leave, Reg declares that Diela has crossed every line, and the best option is to keep her locked away in the family estate. With that, he walks away, his expression completely shrouded in darkness. Meanwhile, back in Derek's room, Diela bursts through the door suddenly, without warning. Surprised by her urgency, Derek asks what she is doing there so early. Without a word, she slams a letter onto the book he is reading. She warns him that if she loses the duel against her brother, Derek will be fired on the spot. The young man reacts calmly, noting that young Master Reg is already an experienced one-star mage, making it highly unlikely she will win. Infuriated by his coldness, Diela yells, demanding to know if that is all he has to say when his own livelihood is on the line. Derek answers bluntly that he is just a mercenary who does the job he is hired for and gets paid. And in the end, he has already been compensated more than enough. Stunned, she asks if he truly does not care about any of this. 1 week later, the Duplain family banner flies high above the arena. A crowd of nobles begins to arrive, making their way to the stands to watch the spectacle. Everyone bows in deep respect, greeting Duke Duplain the moment he appears. Watching the commotion from a distance, Derek remarks that the Duke has finally arrived. He offers a respectful bow to the family patriarch. The Duke notices Derek, observing that the young man is completely calm and composed, showing no signs of nervousness. He reflects that keeping such composure under intense pressure is a rare trait, confirming they absolutely cannot afford to lose a talent like Derek. Moments later, firm footsteps echo through the arena corridor. Reg enters the arena, his cloak billowing in the wind. He strides forward with grim resolve, knowing this is no ordinary test. Today, he will shatter Diela's pride once and for all. His sole purpose is to make his sister bitterly regret everything she has put their family through. On the other side, Diela walks out with calm resolve. She wears a hood to conceal her face. Just moments earlier, she had asked him if he truly cared about nothing as long as he got paid. Derek explains that she must have already noticed her mana flowing more smoothly, and even if she cannot cast one-star magic yet, it won't be long now. He says this is because she was born with a Duplain bloodline, prompting Diela to ask why he is suddenly bringing this up. Derek reminds her of his previous warning that survival in the wild depends entirely on one's own grit. Losing her patience, the girl demands to know why he is telling her this right now, but he remains silent. She admits she knows all too well that she is no star pupil. Even so, she insists she wants to keep learning magic from him, and refuses to have any other master. At that, Derek pauses just before leaving. He pulls on his gloves and admits he knows nothing of etiquette or the rules of noble duels, but he guarantees he knows how to teach someone to win a fight, and asks if she truly wants to claim victory. Diela remembers every humiliation and scathing comment she endured her entire life. Choking back tears, she replies that she wants to win, no matter what it takes. Now standing in the arena, Diela does not stand there as Reg's little sister, nor does she stand there as the youngest daughter of the Duplain family. She stands there solely as Derek's only student and disciple. The two opponents face off. The butler clears his throat to draw their attention. He announces the duel will follow the official rules of the Ebelstein High Mage Hall, and the first to trigger their protective barrier loses the match. And with that, the battle finally begins. This magic barrier activates automatically upon taking a heavy blow, neutralizing the opponent's attack. Derek muses on how nobles love to fight, realizing they must have money to burn to waste it on such a costly accessory that only lasts 10 minutes. Reg advances slowly, starting to gather his wind magic. The light breeze he whips up blows Diela's hood back. The wind concentrates violently into his hand. He unleashes the spell, thinking that today she will learn her place and crawl back to the family annex. With that, he fires a spiral of slicing wind straight at his sister. The attack closes in on Diela with blinding speed. She watches the incoming strike for a split second. Then she bolts as fast as she can to dodge it. Reg is taken aback by her reaction, infuriated that she dares to run from him. He begins to concentrate his mana once more, and unleashes another powerful blast of wind right at her. Diela merely glances back, beginning to analyze her brother's attack. Derek realizes that while he controls one-star magic well, he is a total amateur in real combat, wasting far too much mana by forcing the spell to curve. His gust of wind crashes directly into the wall of ice. Diela raises the barrier with breathtaking ease. Reg scoffs at it, thinking it is just raw accumulated mana rather than real magic, and doubts she can stop his attack with such a cheap trick. He conjures 2 more spheres of wind in the air, and decides he only needs to blow past that flimsy defense. He primes the spell and aims straight for the girl. Diela recalls Derek's warning about how mercenaries fight differently from nobles, abandoning honor and rules to focus entirely on the kill. Since this brutal style violates the etiquette of noble duels, he warns her that she might face backlash if she wins this way. Even so, He promises he can craft a winning strategy for her and asks if she is on board. Diela agrees instantly, without a shred of hesitation. Back in the fight, she locks in with absolute focus. The instant the spell closes in, she leaps aside to dodge. In the mercenary world, there are always those who manage to win even when facing vastly superior opponents. These killers do not fight in civilized duels, but in raw, savage wars. Raig tries to redirect his attack mid-flight, but Diela slips away effortlessly. In war, survival means dominating the terrain and weaponizing absolutely every resource available to secure victory. Even the enemy's slightest distraction must be ruthlessly exploited. She channels her magic and rears up another wall of ice, pouring far more effort and concentration into it than she originally planned. Raig screams that the fight is already over. Diela looks back immediately and sees a blade of wind tearing straight toward her. The impact explodes, kicking up a massive cloud of dust across the arena. Derek watches it unfold, his expression deadpan. Meanwhile, her mother stands up in a panic, screaming Diela's name. She demands that the butler stop the duel immediately before her daughter is mutilated. But Duplain holds his wife back and tells her to sit down, warning her that the clash is not over yet. Morella protests, arguing they all saw the blow hit the girl dead on. But the Duke points out that the general's protective magic circle has not even triggered. He glares at her tutor from a distance to gauge his reaction, and notices that Derek did not even flinch, proving he likely anticipated this exact outcome. Raig stalks through the settling dust. He is certain his strike connected, but finds it bizarre that the safety circle did not deploy. Hidden deep within the smoke, Diela crouches low to the ground. A small section of the wooden arena begins to crack. Out of nowhere, a spike of ice erupts, barely missing him. Raig leaps backward to dodge. He wonders if she is attacking from right beneath the platform. Under the Kelbram Hall rules, she forfeits the match if she steps off the platform, but the butler shakes his head, signaling that the move is legal. Raig realizes this doesn't count as leaving the arena, a dirty tactic no one ever anticipated. Suddenly, something catches his eye. Another ice spike, even larger, nearly impales the boy. In an instant, dozens of other spikes begin erupting from the ground. Raig knows it must be hard to aim blind without being able to see where he is, but she is just aiming to land a hit by any means necessary, completely discarding any noble etiquette. He calls out his sister's name. Diela glares coldly upward from beneath the arena floor. Her eyes glow with a menacing red light. Raig recalls seeing that exact look before, when her brother choked Derek with an eerie, unnatural calmness. He turns his head to the side. He knows Diela would never think of this on her own. This is definitely Derek's plan. He tears the button off his hood and tosses it aside. He warns that if that's how they want to play, he will match their strategy. Terrified, Morella asks if Diela really went under the platform. She demands to know what her husband will do to stop the fight, but Duplain replies that no rules have been broken, and that they will watch a little longer. He watches closely, highly intrigued by the turn of events. Meanwhile, beneath the arena surrounded by ice spikes, Diela concentrates and stares straight up. She can perfectly see his mana flow. High above, Raig begins to gather his magic, but he must dodge quickly, realizing she always targets his feet whenever he tries to cast a spell, and he cannot lose like this. Seconds later, he looks up, right toward the giant flagpole. Diela notices his mana flow has stopped. He must be planning something. No matter what, the instant he starts casting, she will strike with everything she has. Worried, the butler tries to call out to the young master, but the boy is already standing right at the top of the flagpole. He figures she won't be able to react to his mana from this distance, but casting a spell from so far away is impossible. There is only one way to make this work. He must destroy the entire platform without using magic, so he decides to fire a mana arrow instead. Derek doesn't show any reaction, but the mast begins to crack all over, and snaps right in half a moment later, bringing Derek down with it in the collapse. Morella screams her son's name in sheer desperation. He stands up amidst the rising dust. He coughs heavily, but suddenly realizes something. Diela is walking straight through the smoke, so he points his finger right at her, and fires a mana arrow. The girl quickly darts her eyes away. Diela tries to defend herself from the oncoming attack, but her magic barely manages to leave her fingertip. She needs to act fast, because the arrow is already about to hit her. By a hair, she manages to dodge the blow, and keeps running away. Raig believes he has the upper hand at close range, and that just one more magic arrow will end this fight. But out of nowhere, Diela lands a heavy kick straight to his chest. Raig crashes to the ground in severe pain. The girl grabs a handful of dirt from the ground and throws it right into her brother's face, blinding him completely for the moment. With that, she rushes up to the top of the arena. Raig thinks she is resorting to kicks and dirt because she is out of mana, desperately doing whatever she can. She is doing all this just to win, even knowing it is impossible, and he realizes this duel is meant to prove her worth. That is why he will give it his all as her brother. Back on the arena surface, Diela wipes her hand across her head. Blood drips down her chin. She needs to view this like brush strokes on a canvas. Mana is her paint, and magic is her brush. She must gather all that paint floating in the air with her brush to create a complete picture. In that instant, Derek draws a thin line in the air. He He demonstrates that this simple act is already magic itself. Diela is completely captivated by what she sees. Then he lets that energy run wild. Diela closes her eyes to truly concentrate. She begins to draw energy from her surroundings, focusing on the painting metaphor. Instantly, she feels the mana vibrating at her fingertips, and now she will use this paint to begin her drawing. This is real magic taking shape. And just like that, Diela manages to forge a perfect ice spear. The butler watches the scene, utterly stunned. Morella calls out to her husband in a panic, shouting that Diela is casting one-star magic. Raig realizes his sister has actually pulled off the feat. Diela commands the ice spear with pure, raw intuition. Meanwhile, Raig begins preparing a spell in his own hand. He thinks this changes nothing, confident he is still one step ahead in one-star magic. He plans to strike first to secure a swift, brutal victory, but Diela unleashes her attack a split second later, and Raig does the exact same, firing right back. The two spells clash violently mid-air. The collision unleashes a massive shockwave, kicking up a thick cloud of dust and wild energy. In a panic, Morella screams her daughter's name, but a protective barrier has already been erected just in time. Slowly, the smoke begins to clear. Raig struggles to catch his breath, and Diela is equally exhausted. Yet Derek remains standing there, completely unfazed even after such a clash. 1 year earlier at the Duplain mansion, the secretary announces that a letter from the main estate arrived that morning. The subject seemed to be a mere social gathering, but in truth, the real target of that meeting was Diela. She sat right beside them, slumped dejectedly in her chair. Even witnessing this, the Duke showed absolutely no emotion. Back in the present, the girl suddenly gasps. She realizes the protective shield around her is vanishing. She realizes the protective barrier has just vanished. Further ahead, Raig is on his knees, completely drained of mana. The protagonist hangs his head, accepting his ultimate defeat in this duel. Unable to withstand the pressure, Diela breaks down in tears. The Duke watches the entire scene unfold in silence from afar. Morella begins to scream, ranting that such a dirty, vulgar display should not even be considered a real magic duel, but the Duke simply ignores her outburst, remaining dead silent. He remembers introducing himself to the former Duke as Raymond Oswald Duplain, declaring it an honor to serve and fight alongside him in the war. Back then, the former Duke mentioned hearing great things about his father, noting that Raymond inherited those exact same eyes burning with a hidden ambition, and Raymond simply thanked him for the compliment. Now, looking at Diela, the Duke sees that exact same look in her eyes. It strikes a chord deep within him, stirring his cold heart. He notes how much the girl's gaze has sharpened, while the maids rush to swarm around her. They desperately try to soothe and comfort the young lady, but Diela shoves them all away. She takes firm, decisive steps toward Raig. The boy stands speechless in her presence. He merely congratulates her on her effort, and Diela hangs her head. The maids try once more to usher the girl back to her room, but Diela ignores their pleas and keeps walking. She heads straight toward her master. Derek stands motionless, staring at the girl for a few quiet seconds. Diela tries to hold herself together and look strong, but she breaks and bursts into tears again. Clutching her dress tightly, she confesses that she failed and lost the fight, and because of that, she must apologize to him. The protagonist shows no surprise at all. He simply rests his hands on his knees and slowly stands up. He tells her it is fine, and that losing is just a part of life. The key now is to channel that anger to grow and become even stronger. Hearing those words, the girl stops crying for a brief moment, but immediately after, she completely breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her cry of pure anguish echoes across the entire Duplain estate. A moment later, Morella comes rushing over. She calls out to her daughter in sheer desperation. She kneels by her side, crying that her daughter has suffered far too much in this place. She tries to calm the girl down, telling her everything is fine now, and they need to treat those wounds immediately. The mother stands frozen, watching her daughter walk away. She wipes her face and dries her tears with a piece of cloth. In that instant, Derek decides to turn his back and begins to leave. But the woman refuses to let it slide and chases after him, fueled by sheer rage. She starts screaming, calling him a wretched scoundrel and declaring that teaching her daughter one-star magic means absolutely nothing. Without a second thought, she lunges forward and slaps him across the face. She rants that he only taught her cheap tricks, dragging her daughter's reputation through the mud and reducing the Grand Duke's heir to such a vulgar display. Blinded by hatred, she strikes him with another sharp slap. She screams that trash like him has no right to exist in her world and demands he learn to respect those who actually matter. She claims everyone there has dignity and appeals to her husband, arguing he must have seen that this was no real magic duel. But to her absolute shock, the Duke himself intervenes and slaps his wife across the face. He firmly tells her she has crossed the line and asks if she fails to see that she is the only vulgar one here. The woman is utterly baffled and demands to know why she's being treated this way over a mere commoner. Her husband agrees he is indeed a commoner, but reminds her that first and foremost, the boy is their daughter's teacher. He adds that no true parent would ever behave so shamefully in front of a child. The Duke then turns to the boy and apologizes, noting that everyone has a different way of showing love for their children. The protagonist quickly analyzes the situation in silence. He replies that it is fine and there is no need to worry, prompting Raymond to invite him to his office to speak in private. The two turn and head toward the office together. Meanwhile, Morella is left behind, seething with rage over what just happened. Once in the office, the Duke acknowledges acknowledges the young man's work, stating he took exceptional care of the girl. He explains that as the lord of the estate, he must reward him properly, promising the absolute maximum the kingdom allows for a commoner. Then the Duke gets straight to the point and asks if he wants to receive the knowledge of 3-star magic. Derek instantly realizes the Duke hit the bullseye on exactly what he desires. The man reads him perfectly and offers the ultimate deal. After all, he is a 5-star mage and the Grand Duke of this nation. Since an opportunity like this only comes once, the protagonist accepts the offer on the spot. The Duke then issues a warning, stating that in Ebelstein's high society, this alone will not be enough to survive. The young man replies that Duplain has plenty of instructors who can guide Diela, and now that she has the basics down, she will progress rapidly. But the Duke disagrees, arguing his daughter no longer needs a mere instructor, but a true mentor. He refills his pen with ink as he continues his train of thought. He remarks that despite being a commoner, the young man harbors an ambition so grand that most wouldn't even dare to dream of it. The Grand Duke had never spoken this much to him before. Even so, he reads the youth effortlessly, knowing his plans stretch far beyond 3 or even 4 stars. This sharp perception from the nobleman tightens the tension as he concludes the conversation, warning that if the young man truly wishes to climb that high, he cannot afford to waste his time staying in this place for long. He prepares to take his leave. Derek nods in agreement, and the Grand Duke acknowledges his ambition, but makes it clear he must remain Diela's tutor for the time being. That is when the Duke grants him access to the 3-star magic spells, exactly as they previously agreed. The library doors finally swing open. Derek walks calmly through the silent, towering aisles. He pulls one of the massive volumes from the shelves. He studies each complex magic circle with intense focus. He commits the intricate designs to memory with astonishing speed. Even Derek finds his own rapid comprehension incredible. Countless mages spend their entire lives scraping by just to get their hands on a single 2-star grimoire. Yet right here, laid out before him, are multiple 3-star works. With a treasure trove like this within reach, he has absolutely no reason to leave the Grand Duke's estate anytime soon. He knows that once Pelin finds out about this, she will be furious. Later that same day, Diela struts up to him, proudly boasting about finally becoming a 1-star mage. Derek merely nods, dryly reminding her that she has only managed to cast magic a single time. She complains about his cold attitude, demanding to know why he cannot just be happy for her progress, but Derek retorts that her success is not his achievement. She grumbles that he is incredibly difficult, but Derek admits she has improved significantly over the last 3 days. He even teases her, saying her eyes looked ready to pop out from crying so much from sheer exhaustion. Diela tries to play it cool, denying she was crying and making up an excuse about getting dust in her eyes. She grumbles that her father should have warned her about his decision sooner, as she genuinely believed Derek was about to be thrown out of the estate. Derek tells her it is time to begin training, since she is developing fast and will soon be ready to learn actual 1-star spells. Diela spins around in surprise, wanting him to clarify what he means by her fast development. He explains that her growth is highly unusual, especially considering how little time has passed since she first manifested mana. Thrilled, she asks what they will train next, suggesting they try a chantless magic arrow or that powerful wind blade Reg used. She also brings up the ice spear, believing she can match Reg's level with enough practice, but Derek instantly crushes her excitement, telling her she will only be training basic ice manifestation. She protests immediately, demanding to know why she cannot start learning 1-star spells right away. He explains there are several reasons for this, but ultimately mastering the basics is always what matters most. In short, it all comes down to mana control, and despite her whining, Diela ultimately yields to his decision. She mutters that if her tutor says so, she has no choice, admitting she got her hopes up for nothing, thinking she was about to cast real combat magic. A moment later, she narrows her eyes and glares at Derek suspiciously. She asks why he is staring at her like that, demanding to know if there is something on her face. Derek dismisses it, explaining he was just surprised to see her listening so quietly and being so obedient. Diela turns away, her face flushing bright red as she claims she has respected and obeyed his every word since their training began. Derek just stares at her, highly amused by such a blatant lie. After all, she threw dirty water on him twice. She asks if he still remembers that. Quick to change the subject, she remarks on how great the weather is, and how practicing magic seems like pure fun. Derek merely sighs, a faint smile playing on his lips. Night falls over the estate, and Diela collapses to the ground, exhausted and gasping for air. Derek mentions hearing that her schedule is about to get a lot more demanding. She sits up and notes that he already knows everything. She explains that her etiquette and general education classes start next week. Derek calls it a positive step, noting that she has mastered 1-star magic and will now receive the proper training of a true noble. But Diela complains about every single subject, questioning why she even needs to learn this, and wondering how Aisline ever survived such a grueling routine. Derek replies that this is exactly why they call Aisline the Flower of Duplain, and why she rules the center of Ebelstein High Society. Diela insists she only wants to study magic, and Derek tells her to stay focused on that, since the Duke hired him and they still have plenty of time together, but she worries, asking if there is a risk someone might throw him out just to end their lessons. Diela explains that while her father accepted him, her mother is not the type to sit back and do nothing. He asks why the madame would want to expel a tutor, and Diela answers that her mother fears his lessons will tarnish her dignity as a noble. After all, even after seeing the duel, his style is a far cry from what the nobility considers elegant. Derek dismisses the concern, saying it is no great issue. He assures her that putting the madame's mind at ease is simpler than she thinks, as they only need to eliminate the source of her anxiety. Diela is left utterly confused by his words. The next day, Morella walks through the manor, her expression thoroughly grim. She wonders how her daughter managed to find such an utterly unsuitable tutor. She begins to picture the man teaching her daughter how to kidnap people using brutal mercenary tactics, or the young Diela turning into a complete animal once she enters high society. Morella's head begins to throb just imagining these disastrous scenarios. She questions how a commoner could possibly teach her daughter, because even if her husband accepted the situation, she is still the mistress of this estate. She decides she must find a way to resolve this herself. At that moment, Diela calls out to her mother. The woman thinks to herself that, despite everyone saying her daughter is still far too childish, she deeply loves the way the girl usually runs into her arms with a bright smile. But none of that happens as the madame is jolted from her thoughts. She opens her eyes to the reality before her. Diela executes a flawless, elegant bow and politely asks if her mother slept well. Morella stands frozen, completely shocked by her daughter's behavior. Diela explains she could not leave the annex sooner because she was treating her training wounds, apologizes for not speaking with her earlier, and announces she must now head to piano practice. Morella simply accepts her daughter's words, at a total loss for how to react. Diela says her goodbyes and takes her leave, mentioning that her study schedule is incredibly tight. Morella seizes the moment to ask if her etiquette classes are indeed starting next week. Diela confirms, adding that thanks to her mother's consideration, she hopes to learn a great deal from them. With that, she turns on her heel and walks away. On her way, a maid panics and drops everything she is carrying onto the floor. Diela stops and asks if she is hurt. The woman is left in absolute shock by the girl's sudden change in attitude. The rest of the maids watch in silence as Diela walks away. In a noble district of Ebelstein, a young lady remarks that the salon feels much livelier and filled with laughter today. She admits she was genuinely worried about Iseline during their last meeting, as she seemed quite downcast. Iseline smiles and replies that she never intended to give that impression. She explains that most of the problems keeping her awake at night have been resolved, so she is feeling much better now. Elente, the second daughter of the Belmiard family, calls it a relief and mentions a rumor that Iseline actually left the noble district to save someone. Iseline appreciates the concern, but explains she was actually busy looking for a magic tutor for her younger sister. Elente finds it curious and wonders just how incredible this tutor must be to make Lady Duplain search for him in person. Denise, the second daughter of the Veltas family, joins the conversation and asks if this tutor is for Lady Diela. Iseline confirms, sharing that she saw Diela at the mansion recently and that she has become so polite she is barely recognizable. She adds that the girl has even reached 1-star level, and her posture was so elegant it made Iseline feel she needs to work harder herself. Denise finds it strange that the Duplain family is no longer hiding Diela, but agrees that this tutor must be extraordinary. Iseline explains that although he lacks a noble title, he is highly competent, making it well worth going to the Belden Mercenary Guild herself to hire him. Both noblewomen are shocked to hear that the tutor in question is a mercenary. Elente searches her memory and remembers that, in the end, the girl they are discussing is still Diela, the very same girl who drove her family's chef to quit his job with the Duplains. She finds it impressive that a tutor managed not only to tame that violent girl, but also to turn her into a 1-star mage. Thinking of this, a smile creeps onto her face. She admits her curiosity and demands to know the man's name. After all, if he managed to civilize Diela, he is bound to become highly famous, so she wants to know his name now. Iseline answers casually that his name is Derek. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Diela speaks with her mother and explains she was studying etiquette on her own, but found it too difficult to learn alone. Morella comments that she finds her daughter's self-study efforts admirable. Diela counters that despite her efforts, Derek was the one who taught her the most, prompting Morella to ask what on earth was so difficult that she needed him. The girl replies that almost everything is difficult, and she can only do things properly now because of Derek. Morella grows irritated as she realizes this man's name finds its way into every conversation. Losing her patience, she wonders how many more times she will have to hear her daughter speak this Derek's name. Morella cannot fathom what Derek did to Diela, but she decides she cannot let this slide and must take action. She recalls the maids constantly gossiping about how unusually generous Diela has been to the household staff. In a matter of mere weeks, the girl's behavior has completely transformed. It is a staggering shift, and the only other person Morella has ever seen change so drastically is Iseline. She reasons that perhaps her daughter truly is putting in the effort to carry herself like a proper young noble. A few days later, in the late afternoon, with a spellbook spread open on the ground, the training begins. Derek shuts his eyes, channeling every ounce of his concentration. He begins to shape and gather mana in the palm of his hand, but he grits his teeth as strain and frustration warp his focus. The energy spikes violently, and he loses control of the spell. Sapped of all strength, his body collapses onto the ground in sheer exhaustion. He looks back at the sound of approaching footsteps. Reg appears and apologizes for interrupting his training session. Derek pulls himself up and asks what brings him out here. Reg sits on the grass and explains that he wants to talk about Diela. He spots the book and notes that it is a 3-star grimoire, which Derek confirms, adding that the Duke lent it to him personally. Reg is visibly taken aback by the revelation. Derek quickly adds that the contents are still far beyond his current level, but there is no harm in studying ahead. Reg remembers the day his father called Derek a true mage. He smiles and says the young man's dedication is truly admirable. Derek cuts straight to the chase, asking what Reg wanted to discuss regarding Diela. Reg admits it is a bit awkward, but he wants to know what girls her age actually enjoy. He suggests that perhaps she would like a doll made in her own likeness. Derek instantly pictures Valerian's bizarre doll and flatly replies that it is a terrible idea. The two begin walking back to the mansion, and Reg notes that things are changing around the estate and that he must accept this new reality. He confesses he was likely turning a blind eye or simply running away, but seeing Diela's transformation made him realize he can change too. He knows this is all thanks to Derek's influence and makes sure to express his gratitude. Derek merely nods in silence, accepting the thanks. Reg remarks that Diela's style of magic feels different, comparing it to painting the walls of a room in a completely unique way. Derek reflects that genius always shows its worth, and that Reg definitely inherits the sharp Duplain bloodline to have noticed such a subtle difference. He explains to Reg that Diela utilizes the mana control technique of the Jungle School. He explains that how one wields mana varies from person to person, and that she will soon reach a level where she can study independently without any guidance. He concludes that past that point, a teacher's interference would only hinder her natural development. Reg agrees, confident that when that moment comes, she will undoubtedly shine on her own. 2 months pass after that conversation. Diela asks what those flowers are, and the maid replies that she brought them to put in her hair. The girl comments that the scent is wonderful, making it feel like spring arrived long ago. In that time, she fully masters 1-star magic and grows closer and closer to the household staff. She feels as if she wasted her entire life until now, and she knows this complete turnaround is all because of Derek. The maid asks if today is magic class since she looks so happy, and Diela confirms with a smile. She even thinks of saving the leftover flower as a gift for Derek, but suddenly the flowers slip and crash to the floor. Diela stands completely frozen, paralyzed by what she just heard. She asks what Derek could possibly mean by that. The young man replies that she heard him perfectly clear. He says he has nothing left to teach her. He explains that things work just like the seasons and spring never lasts forever. Later in the study, Derek speaks with the Duke, noting that he must have realized Diela's talent belongs to a free-form style, much like nature itself. He explains that if he keeps meddling in her training, he will only end up limiting the girl's potential. The Duke remarks that, by the looks of it, there is no longer any reason for him to stay at the mansion. But despite his blunt words, the Duke looks deeply saddened. He stands and walks to the window, noting how the mansion completely transformed since the young man arrived, and how his daughter finally managed to grow because of him. The Duke confesses that he was so focused on governing his lands that he failed to be a good father, but now he feels a massive weight lifted off his shoulders. He then asks when the young man intends to leave. Derek replies that he heard Azaleen is visiting the mansion before returning to Ebelstein, and he plans to hitch a ride with her. The Duke agrees and asks him to return the library key now, but the young man says he still needs to finish reading a few books and will hand the key to the head butler afterward. But Raymond flatly refuses, demanding the key back this very instant. Derek stares in silence at the book tucked into his waist. The Duke turns away and says that if he has nothing else to say, he may leave. The young man quietly stands up and gives a parting bow to the Duke's back. As he walks through the mansion hallways, he runs into Diela, who complains that he showed up out of nowhere and is now leaving just the same. The young man says there is no other way, and Diela replies that she knows he won't listen, but she has to say it anyway. She looks into his eyes and asks if he can't just stay. Derek doesn't answer, only walking slowly toward the girl. He explains that he will return to mercenary work to study more about magic, and suggests she come to Ebelstein once she turns 15 and grows stronger. He promises they will meet again, adding that if he refines his own skills by then, he will be able to teach her new things. Diela complains that he is irritating because he always says the right thing, leaving her with no way to argue back. Later, night falls over the mansion, and the girl sleeps fitfully, breaking into a cold sweat. She remembers the endless nightmares of people cursing her name, and how she had to endure all of it completely alone. Suddenly, she jolts awake, letting out a terrified scream, gasping for air immediately after. Slowly, she realizes it was just another nightmare. The maid opens the bedroom door and asks if everything is all right, explaining that she heard a scream and got worried. In that instant, Diela begins to think, wondering if she should go back to her old ways, beating the maid and smashing plates to cause trouble, because that is the only way Derek would be forced to stay there with her. The maid presses on, asking if she is feeling unwell. Diela bites her lip and immediately abandons that selfish idea, answering only that it was nothing. She says she is fine and tells the maid not to worry, promising herself she will never act like a spoiled brat again. The next day, inside the carriage, Iseline mentions she will drop him off near the commercial district, telling him to say his goodbyes quickly, as the journey is about to begin. Derek looks back immediately, observing every single person he lived with and bonded with in that mansion. Valerian asks if he is really leaving, and Derek confirms it, saying he needs to go home. Raig comments that life in the mansion was far from easy, and that he worked incredibly hard, making it clear that if he ever needs anything, he just has to send word, and they will help however they can. Derek thanks them all with a nod, but his gaze ultimately lands on Diella. The girl asks why he is staring at her like that, snapping that if he thinks she is going to beg him to stay, he is dead wrong, because she is no longer a child. Derek replies that it was a great honor to be her teacher, and, though he is no longer officially her tutor, he hopes she never forgets the magic she learned by his side. Diella fires back, saying she will keep telling everyone he is her teacher, just to deny him a single moment of peace. Derek only offers her a smirk. That smile stirs the girl's emotions even more, making her turn her face away to hide it as she tells him to take care and not get hurt out there, adding that she is a big girl now and can take care of herself. Those words trigger an old memory for Derek, back when he said the exact same thing in the past. Back then, his master simply hugged him tight, telling him to take her advice seriously. Back in reality, Derek looks at the girl and calls out to Diella. He places his hand on her head and tells her she doesn't need to grow up so fast. The girl looks away, her eyes brimming with tears. She breaks down sobbing the moment he begins to walk away. At the last second, she shouts Derek's name and waves, reminding him they will see each other again soon. The protagonist gives one last bow before stepping into the carriage. After all, their next meeting already has a place set, Ebelstein. Later, in the commercial district, the door to a rowdy tavern slams open. Inside, Pauline lands a heavy punch square on a man's face, while the rest of the mercenaries cheer and shout, fueling the brawl. She stops what she is doing, looks at the door, and calls out to the protagonist. In that instant, Derek feels like he is finally back in his true home. Jaden pours some honey wine, explaining that while nobles drink this stuff with fancy airs, the welcome drink is on the house since Derek likes it. Pauline looks at him and asks if he was always this pale, or if he ended up that way after living among the nobility. She mentions that when she heard he became a magic instructor, she also heard those nobles are always using drugs, and demands to know what really happened out there. Derek brushes it off, saying he just worked hard and has nothing particularly interesting to share. Pauline complains, saying he is already talking like a stiff, proper noble. As Jaden hands out the drinks, the girl grumbles that she went through absolute hell working all alone while he was away. The tavern owner chimes in, saying that at the very least, the trip must have brought in good money, and asks if they paid him well. Derek replies that he ended up receiving something far more valuable than gold coins. He places a spellbook on the table, leaving them both wide-eyed, unable to believe they are looking at a 2-star grimoire. Derek smiles and says no, that they are actually 3-star spells. The two panic, asking if he stole it, and warning him that he could lose his head if he gets caught. Derek calms them down, explaining it was a gift from the Grand Duke himself. Pauline tells him to quit lying, and jokingly asks if the Grand Duke doesn't need an archery instructor too. As night falls, Derek asks if the tavern has received many commission requests lately, but Jaden finds it strange, asking if he already plans to take on a mission on his very first day back. The protagonist confirms, saying he wants something simple, like a light hunt just to shake off the rust. Jaden laughs and says they are always short on mages, so work will definitely not be lacking. The protagonist accepts and announces he will start tomorrow, first thing in the morning. The next morning, the group's carriage hits the road early. Deep in the forest, Pauline runs to lure away several massive monsters, but working as a team, they quickly bring the beasts down one by one. Derek takes the opportunity to test his body, proving his magic swordsmanship remains sharp. With the job done, the day ends with the exhausted group riding back in the carriage. They set up camp along the way to rest and eat. But in the dead of night, Derek slips away in silence, walking alone toward the edge of the forest. He attempts to focus his 3-star magic in the dead of night. Slowly, a small crystal begins to take shape in his hand, but the process spirals out of control, triggering a violent explosion. Derek hits the ground, realizing that while 2-star spells come easy to him now, the next level is a different beast entirely. The barrier to reaching the 3rd star remains a massive wall. Time passes, and back at the tavern, the bitter cold finally hits with full force. The door swings open and the two step inside, desperate to escape the freezing air. Jaden remarks that it must be nice to be young, seeing how they made it to the Kent Mountains and back unscathed in this miserable weather. He adds that only 2 lunatics like them would bring back a harpy's head in a raging storm like this. Derek accepts the compliment, while Pauline admits she feels much better inside the warm tavern. Jaden tells them that since they worked hard, they can rest tomorrow, as there is only one perfect job left, and it is for Derek. It is a simple, highly paying task, though it might require some heavy physical labor. The next day, Derek walks toward the job, turning over Count Belmiard's request in his head. At the end of the day, the noble family is looking for a commoner to help with combat practice, which means they need a living punching bag. The plan is simple. He just has to take a beat beating, take the coin, and leave. Later, the young noblewoman Alenta walks through the grounds flanked by the family butler. She asks who her opponent is today, and the butler replies that they hired a commoner for her to practice her offensive magic on. Alenta finds it odd and questions if the plan is really just to fight some random commoner. The man explains that this is part of her training and that the guy was promised a handsome reward so she can unleash her full power without any guilt. The girl agrees, thinking this session will be nothing more than beating down a nobody. She knows she will soon become a 2-star mage, and the gap in power between them is a vast chasm. Arriving at the training arena, Derek is already warming up for the fight. The girl approaches him and asks if he is her opponent for today. The protagonist politely introduces himself to her. The young noblewoman gives her name in return, though she can't help but feel she has heard his name somewhere before. The instructor calls them to the arena, while Alenta watches the boy, wondering if he is even a mage at his young age. She begins to stretch and prepare herself before the fight begins. She asks if he at least knows the basic etiquette of a magic duel. The protagonist calmly replies that yes, he knows the rules. The girl then tells him to hold on as long as he can because she wants to get this over with quickly. She says she will see what he can do, but warns that if she blasts him out of the ring with a shockwave, it will all end in the blink of an eye. Derek asks with absolute composure just how much resistance she actually needs him to show. The girl bristles, demanding to know what kind of ridiculous question that is. The protagonist explains that he only wants to know how much he should hold back and endure her attacks to make her training useful. The instructor merely watches the boy's audacity and shakes his head in disapproval. The girl lets out an arrogant sigh. She scoffs at his strange way of talking and repeats that he just needs to endure as much as he can. Derek shrugs and agrees, since that is how she wants it. In that instant, both of them begin to manifest their magic. She almost praises him for mastering 1-star magic at such a young age, but decides he is far too arrogant to deserve it. Wasting no time, she casts her spell and fires it straight at him with everything she has. Derek stays focused and dodges the attack with ease. The blast flies right past him and explodes, obliterating the arena wall behind him. Elente watches, deeply impressed by his evasion. The protagonist keeps his rhythm and dares her to bring on the next attack. This infuriates the noble girl, making her realize he actually has the skills to back up his confidence. Even so, she knows the gap in their power remains massive. Suddenly, several mana arrows begin to sprout from the ground. The projectiles float and begin to orbit around her. She points and unleashes the barrage straight at the protagonist. Derek reacts instantly, deflecting the magic with a blunt strike of his elbow. The spell ricochets and flies right back toward her, but she reacts quickly, altering the trajectory of each projectile and shattering them all in mid-air. She is stunned that he can manipulate a simple spell with such brutal precision. The instructor watches, thinking the boy's level of control is incredible for a commoner, confirming the rumors of him being a seasoned mercenary are true. Elente admits she underestimated her opponent and begins channeling a much stronger spell. This time, she decides to go all out. Derek realizes she has changed her strategy. Her plan now is not to hit him directly, but to demolish the entire platform beneath his feet. The girl finishes her incantation and conjures a massive flame. She unleashes the fire, which surges rapidly toward the protagonist. He looks at the massive scale of the attack and realizes dodging is impossible. With no other choice, he raises an energy shield that absorbs the impact of the massive blast. A thick cloud of smoke rises and spreads across the combat arena. Derek steps out of the smoke, dispersing his protective shield. But before he can even catch his breath, he is caught completely off guard. The young noble is already right in front of him, poised for her next move. She readies an ice spear at point-blank range, a distance that rules out any chance of dodging or raising a new shield. Cornered, the protagonist snaps his fingers, thinking her talent is freakishly good. A blinding flash of light erupts from his hand right in front of her face. The glare is so intense it leaves her completely blinded for a few seconds. Blinded, she spins around, desperately wondering where he went, but she can still react if she focuses entirely on sound. Suddenly, something grazes her neck. Elente gasps in shock. There was no sound at all. As her vision begins to clear, she sees the protagonist with his magic active. He unleashes a barrage of attacks straight at her. She barely manages to dodge the onslaught. She realizes he used an illusion spell to silence the sound, anticipating she would rely on her hearing. That first grazing blow was nothing but a warning. Anger flares inside her. How dare he go easy on her? The protagonist keeps firing his spells without pause. Acting fast, she controls her own magic to defend herself, but panic sets in as she realizes he is closing the distance. A confident smirk crosses her face. After all, rapid casting is her specialty. The moment she releases the energy from her hand, this fight is over. But the protagonist moves first, shifting his stance. He stomps his foot violently onto the ground. She watches, utterly baffled by his move. Suddenly, a surge of lightning erupts from the ground. She cannot comprehend how he unleashed that magic so fast. Desperate, she throws her hands up to shield herself. Watching from afar, her master is stunned, unable to read the flow of his energy. The impact sends Elente crashing to the ground. She smiles, finding him far more interesting than she ever imagined. She admits she underestimated him at first, even thinking he was a fraud. She rises to her feet and stands before the protagonist. She bows deeply, showing respect for the incredible display of power. She offers him her full gratitude for the fight. fight. Then, she retaliates with the exact same lightning stomp spell. Derek merely shields his face as the attack charges toward him. He controls the magic surrounding his body with staggering precision, and redirects the attack straight back at the girl. He leaps immediately after, giving her absolutely no time to react. She freezes in sheer panic, completely helpless. But right at that moment, the bell begins to toll. Her master interrupts the duel just in time. With that, Derek aborts his attack and lands on his feet. He praises the girl, telling her she did a good job. Elente is frozen, completely at a loss for words. A little later, the two talk in a lounge area. She remarks that he is an excellent mage, but Derek brushes it off as nothing special, and praises her impressive agility instead. Elente notes that he seems highly experienced in this world and mentions hearing he is a commoner, so he must be pushing himself to the absolute limit to get this far. Derek confirms this, explaining that he has to, since his plan is to survive as a mercenary. Elente says she respects hard workers, but warns him that her master, that old man, does not seem to like him at all. She advises Derek not to let his guard down while in that man's crosshairs. The girl thanks him, saying she learned a lot, and mentions she has another fight at the Rosia Hall where she might now secure a major victory. Derek replies that with her skills, she has absolutely nothing to worry about. But Elente explains she is not worried about ordinary opponents, but rather the one person she is desperate to defeat. That person is Lady Iseline of the Duplin family. She bids the protagonist farewell, telling him he is dismissed and free to go. Derek nods and begins to walk away. Watching him leave, Elente tries to remember where she has heard that name before. Then, it finally clicks. He was Diela's private tutor. The girl sprints as fast as she can and grabs the protagonist's arm before he can escape. She demands to know if he is indeed the mercenary who tutored Diela. At nightfall, the two sit down to talk near a fireplace. Elente gets straight to the point, declaring she will do whatever it takes to defeat Iseline. She confesses she has not reached level 2 yet and needs to get there before the fight. But if that is impossible, she at least wants to beat Iseline in a pure clash of magic. Derek smirks, noting her intense competitive streak. The girl admits it might just be stubbornness, but defeating Iseline is her absolute priority. She wants it so badly that she does not care if she has to resort to underhanded tactics or outright cheating. She confesses that harboring jealousy is ugly and embarrassing, and that is exactly what she felt toward Iseline. To make matters worse, talking behind her back or looking for flaws never worked, because Iseline was always kind and welcoming to everyone. Derek listens in silence, then asks why she decided to reveal all this to him. The girl calmly sets her cup down on the table. She explains that by exposing her darkest side, she wanted to prove her absolute sincerity, and now she has some critical questions to ask. Derek nods, giving her the floor. The girl points out that since he lived at the Duplain estate, he must know exactly how powerful Iseline really is, and he has also just witnessed the extent of her own abilities. So she asks him directly, which of them is the stronger one? She demands to know what she must do to defeat Iseline. Derek hesitates for a moment before admitting that Iseline is on an entirely different level, but looking into her eyes, he realizes that sometimes a person's deepest desperation is written plain as day. The girl standing before him did not ask this question just to hear empty praise. She is desperate enough to seek answers from a mere mercenary. After another moment of silence, he delivers the brutal truth. She will never defeat Iseline. She bites her lip but refuses to back down. She demands victory at any cost, no matter how impossible it seems. She reminds him that he successfully turned Diela into a real mage, and she demands to know if he can do the same for her to help her crush Iseline. Derek answers that there are ways, but confesses that one major obstacle stands in their path. She sits down, declaring they are finally speaking the same language, and demands to know what is holding him back. First, he asks if she has any idea what his training methods for Diela actually looked like. Elente admits she does not know the details, but fires back that she will do absolutely anything to win. Derek then points out his second concern. She knows exactly what he is, a mercenary. Elente cuts him off, stating she does not care if people whisper behind her back. She is deadly serious. Her goal is to command respect throughout the entire empire. To her, nothing matters if she cannot sit at the absolute pinnacle of Ebelstein's high society. That is why she tells him not to doubt her resolve over such trivial matters. She knows exactly what is worth more than her own pride. Derek clarifies that she misunderstood. He simply meant she has to pay for his services. The girl instantly flushes red at his words. Covering her embarrassment, she scoffs that money was always a given, promising to pay whatever astronomical sum he demands. Since she is so deadly serious, he realizes he will have to unleash his most brutal training methods on her. Sometime later in the Rosea salon, Iseline notes that the next gathering will feature magic duels again, and since she heard Elente has improved significantly, she must prepare thoroughly. The other two noble women present mention that they will also participate in the event. They laugh, teasing Iseline for being far too humble. Right then, Iseline spots Elente walking in. Iseline greets her, saying they were just talking about her, but Elente fires back that she could hear her voice from all the way down the hall. The other nobles whisper that it is best to diffuse the tension before things turn ugly. Elente sneers that Iseline indeed needs to train hard, since she has never lost a fight and is revered as the crown jewel of the Duplains. Iseline thanks her for the compliment, but counters that since her opponent is Elente, she cannot afford to let her guard down. Elente declares her absolute confidence, revealing she hired a new magic tutor who, despite despite being a commoner, boasts an incredible track record. Even better, his elite skills were verified by Aiseline herself, because the tutor she hired is none other than Derek. Aiseline is completely caught off guard by the news. Elente mistakes her shock for fear, assuming Aiseline is green with envy now that the man she lost is working for someone else. A single sweat drop rolls down Aiseline's face. She congratulates Elente, calling her smart and reliable for making such a choice. She smiles and offers her congratulations once more. Elente accepts the praise, though she privately notes she didn't expect such a calm reaction. In that instant, Aiseline flashes back to a past event. She remembers suggesting they request more lessons from Derek, feeling their progress had stalled and that his guidance would make a difference. But Diela brushed the idea aside, claiming she didn't need that much help since she was already someone of great importance. Aiseline begins to analyze that past exchange with a cold, calm focus. Elente believes she has won, thinking that once her rival realizes the gravity of losing such a tutor, she will finally break. She waits, expecting Aiseline to finally show her rage. Instead, Aiseline merely warns her that Derek's methods can be a bit extreme. Elente says she enjoyed the chat and says goodbye, announcing she must leave since today is the day of her first lesson. With that, she takes her leave. Aiseline reassures herself that it is nothing to worry about, convincing herself that Derek is not the type to do anything malicious. From a distance, Denise watches the entire scene unfold while sipping her tea. She reflects on how, at the end of the day, everyone is just trying to make a living one way or another. Over at Jaden's bar, Derek declares he is putting all distractions aside to focus on his next job. He finds it perfect that he doesn't need to travel all the way to the Count's estate, since he can handle everything right here in Ebelstein. Jaden warns him that he makes it sound too easy, reminding him that his new student might stand absolutely no chance of defeating Aiseline. Derek replies that he already has a plan for that. If Elente can break past the 2-star level, they can use that advantage to tip the scales in her favor, even if she has to face Aiseline. Jaden tells him to cut the optimism and demands to hear the actual, realistic plan. Derek says that is exactly what he wants to discuss, because he is going to need his help. On top of that, he adds that they will also need Pauline's assistance. Jaden is stunned to hear that name. He asks if his friend is planning some kind of suicide mission. Derek confesses that, truth be told, the plan is already incredibly dangerous on its own. As if confirming his words, Pauline weeps and complains that the whole thing was far too risky, as they are dealing with professional con artists. She cries that they played her completely, stripping her of every last coin she had. By late afternoon, the scene shifts to Elente's estate. The protagonist announces they are kicking things off with real combat training. He explains they will repeat the battle 10 times to analyze the nuances of her magic, prompting a terrified Elente to ask if he is seriously throwing her into 10 consecutive rounds of combat. Derek replies that he needs to see how she performs in a real fight first. She complains that his teaching style is brutal, but shrugs it off, admitting she didn't hire him for boring lectures anyway. With that, he readies his magic and announces they are starting. A few hours later, she is gasping heavily for air. He commends her effort and grants her a 10-minute break, warning that they will dive into theory right after. She groans and asks if that's really it, claiming there isn't a single drop of mana left in her body. But he counters that if she pushes a little harder, she will definitely find some reserve energy. He points out that her form was off and demands she focus harder to conjure 10 more ice spheres. He warns that if she can't even manage that, she might as well quit now because they still have 5 rounds left. He keeps pushing her, ordering her to cast spells until her mana is completely drained. Later, he says she worked hard for the day and dismisses her for dinner. He asks if she's alright, reminding her that quitting is always an option if she truly can't handle the strain. In response, she instantly forces herself back up. She asks if he really thought she would quit over a workout like this, scoffing that he made a massive deal out of nothing and that this is just standard effort. She snaps that he has no idea what she had to endure just to survive in high society. He admits that he might